had an amazing time recently cycling the length of the West Malaysian peninsula.
Oh, mate.
I rode a Triban Gravel 520, kindly supplied by Decathlon. And here's what was good, what was bad, and what I'd change if we did it again. First up, a bit about the frame and fork and the sizing. I rode in small, which has a 52 centimeter top tube. Be careful with the geometry chart on the Decathlon website because they're using a non-standard measurement for the top tube. Measuring it in real life, this is a 52. I'm about 5'10" and this was the perfect choice for me. It's a pretty relaxed frame, so it's great for people who are newer to cycling. I ride a lot of very aggressive racing bikes usually, and I think I would have preferred the front end to be a little bit lower. It came with a 70mm stem, which is very short. I could have switched it out for a stem of negativity to get that front end lower. And I probably would next time. It would have taken away a bit of my weight from the saddle and put it into my hands and distributed my weight better. But all of this is very personal and you have to figure out what works for you. For the target audience, they've done a great job at speccing the right size components though. In the smaller size frames, you get narrower bars, a shorter stem, and even shorter cranks. Something you don't see that often on bikes at this price point, which is a shame. So well done Decathlon. Weight. My bike was about 25 kilograms fully loaded. Without all the bags and some very small changes I made to it, the bike's about 10.5 kilos. It has a carbon bladed fork to reduce weight, but bear in mind the steerer is still aluminium. Bear in mind also that this has disc brakes. I think they've done a pretty decent job considering the price point of this bike to get the weight down. But frankly, if you had a super light bike to start with, are you really going to notice the difference once you've loaded it up with bags? The other guys on the trip had lighter setups, but then they borrowed all of my stuff. We even had a bagless tear up with some of the local riders from Kuala Lumpur in the middle of our trip. And I had a great time. Sure, it's not a racing bike, but it does the job. Bag setup. Tailfin kindly put in some cash to make this trip happen, and the majority of my bags are from them. Full pannier rack with a trunk-style aero pack on the top, mounted via their special quick-release skewer. A few of you asked why not mount it directly to the frame because there's mounts on the frame. Easy answer, you can't take it off as easily. You have to use bolts to attach it to the frame, whereas using the quick release system that Tailfin have, which fits both through axles or quick release, pretty much any bike, you can even fit it to a mountain bike, it takes a grand total of 2 seconds to take it off, which turns out was very important to us because Malaysia does not like bikes inside hotel rooms. So we ended up having to take all of our bags off every time we finished. I had oodles of space, but a pretty hefty bike, carrying most of the spares, which the other guys ended up borrowing. Next time, I'll sneak some bricks into Lawrence's bike. I rode with 4 bottles, 2 in the main triangle and 2 on the forks, which turned out to be an excellent choice. If it wasn't so hot, I probably would have opted for a full frame bag and a camelback for water, but it would have been miserable in the temperatures that we were riding in. Gears were SRAM Apex 1x. This is the mechanical 11-speed version of SRAM Apex, 1142 cassette with a 40 on the front. Despite carrying significantly more weight than I would on a normal ride, the gearing was absolutely fine. Only one point in our ride did I have to do some walking, and the other boys had to as well. And they were riding doubles. It was just so steep and hot. Trust me, if you're in Georgetown, don't try and ride a loaded bike up here.
What are you doing? This is ridiculous.
Top end gears were fine as well. I mean, let's face it, unless you're racing and you need to be pedaling at 50k an hour, does it matter, especially on a trip like this? No. I'd much rather have an extra gear on the easier end of the scale. It felt very smooth to use. Levers are okay, but not as comfortable as the higher end ones from SRAM. They're very small, so if you have small hands, I'm sure they'll be great. I have quite big hands. I prefer a slightly bigger lever. The other bike that I've ridden from Triban at a very similar price point is the RC 520, which had 105 on it. I prefer the ergonomics of the 105 levers to this, but personal preference. Brakes. I love this bit of the setup. It has TRP high roads installed. So, the group set is fully mechanical, with cable actuated brakes. However, they've installed brake calipers which have a hydraulic reservoir inside. So they fit flat mount, just like any other brake caliper. You thread a cable through, but the power is so much better than on a fully cabled system. They're easy to adjust. You can take a spare cable with you, which is a pretty easy job to replace. And I would always recommend if you're doing a long trip like this. And they were so powerful compared to Lawrence's brakes He was on full cabled discs and, well, he couldn't exactly stop very well. Something I like to be able to do. This brake choice is one that really helps Decathlon get the price of this bike lower because they can use the more affordable mechanical levers. They did the same thing on the road version of this bike, the RC520, which I tested a few months back, and arguably braking performance is even more important on a gravel specific bike like this. So again, really happy with this choice. TRP High Roads is a win. You can buy these separately, so if you've got cable discs and you're not happy with the performance, perhaps it's an upgrade worth looking at. Wheels. These are 650B or 27.5-inch wheels. Smaller than your usual road bike. Usually 650B means you can squeeze in a higher volume tyre without it rubbing the fork or the frame. The rims are tubeless ready, which means you can run them without an inner tube inside. It creates a seal, and then the sealant, hopefully, seals punctures as they happen. We did have to add an extra layer of tubeless tape to make the seal better on the wheels when they arrived. However, that might have been the tyre choice because the standards that companies are building tyres and rims to are all over the place. My rear wheel is very slightly out of true now after the 2 weeks of riding. This could have happened at numerous points in the trip. I did run over a giant dead lizard at one point, and I fell down a hole while walking and dropped my bike.
I just fell down a hole.
In hindsight, all being matched on the same wheel and tyre size would have been a good choice. We had to carry extra spares, or in Lawrence's case, no spares at all. I think we should have all been on 700C wheels. I didn't need the extra tyre clearance. It means you can share all the spares, and it's very easy these days finding parts for 700C wheels all over the world. Tyres. We run gravel tyres nearly always on trips like this, even if the trip is road, because you never know what you're going to end up riding on. I got these on Amazon. They're Gravel Kings. I found them by ordering price low to high 650B, and they came next day and I needed them quickly. They were actually all right. They needed to be high volume because of the 650B wheels. You don't want your bottom bracket to be too low if you ran really skinny road tires. I've heard very mixed reviews on these Panaracer Gravel Kings. When I took them over to Nick's bike shop to set them up, he was like, "Oh, these are the ones that come pre-punctured." But with only one hole that needed plugging, I think I did all right over the course of the trip. I did notice a few patches on the tyre where sealant had come out and actually sealed holes. Perhaps this says more about how good the sealant is rather than how good the tyre is. Also, the fact that they were high volume and lower pressure probably meant the tubeless worked better. The things I hated the most. The saddle. I'm sorry, Physique. Perhaps I haven't tried enough of your saddles, but every time I ride one, it's very uncomfortable. Thankfully, the trip was only 2 weeks long. I ended up riding out of the saddle for so much of the ride. Never again. Bear in mind the bike isn't spec'd with a Physique saddle, it's spec'd with a Triban one. I switched this out myself. So I only have myself to blame. I should probably take my own advice from tips videos and not try something new without testing it before. It was a Physique Antares versus 3D printed thing, and it's really expensive and it just didn't work for me. I'm sure there's some people out there who will find this saddle fantastic. So what's the conclusion? It's not that light. It's not a racing bike. It's not fancy. It doesn't let you configure your own gear shifting in an app, but you'd be hard pressed to find something better for the price. Currently retailing for £1,099. Tubeless, gear range, super strong brakes, replacement hanger. It hits all the points that I want from a bike for a trip. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you Kask, thank you Tailfin, and thank you Decathlon for making this trip possible. Let us know in the comment section where we should go next.